Ikuku Kauai, absolutely beautiful. I recognize the Vaughan Williams, unusual, the Jupiter, and the Jupiter Suite, I think, and the White Legend was the second, but it was Ikuku's own arrangement, certainly, of Jupiter. We are going to change the set because this conference is not just showcasing wonderful musical talent, it's also looking at initiatives, the actors, networks, and ideas that were stimulated by DSD. And that means examples of good practice from all over the world will play an important part in identifying the more viable approaches to ESD, as well as key areas for action in the future. So now we're going to hear 5 ministerial statements on commitments to scale up ESD action building on the decade for ESD, looking beyond the UN Decade of Education for Sustainable Development. So can all the ministers come on stage, please? Come on stage now. While we wait, I'll give you who will speak first. So please, yep, come on stage now. And I think you should have name places here. Ms. Cornelia Quennett-Thielsen here. Wonderful, thank you. Are you all settled? Lovely, comfortable? Okay, let's hear first from Madir bin Ahmed Ben Nasser al-Shabaniya, the Minister of Education in that wonderful country, Oman.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Ma'ali Irina Bokova.
In the name of God, the passionate and the merciful. Irina Bokova, Director General of UNESCO. Your Royal Highnesses, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to begin by saying that it is an honor for me to convey to you the greetings of His Excellency Sultan Qaboos Al Said, may God protect him, and his wishes of every success at this conference. I would also like to take this opportunity to hail UNESCO's efforts and the role that it has played in all of the areas in which it plays a key role, and in particular in education, and also for everything that has been accomplished during the United Nations Decade for Education for Sustainable Development. On behalf of my country, the Sultanate of Oman, I would like to express my gratitude to the government of Japan for the warm welcome that has been extended to us and for having taken the initiative to organize this international conference, which is a milestone along the path of strengthening the achievements of the Decade for ESD. Today, we are meeting to take stock of what we've accomplished over the past decade. We do so at a time when we are reaching the end of the Education for All program. It's also taking place at a time when we are reviewing the Millennium Development Goals and preparing the post-2015 development agenda, which includes the education agenda. And we certainly do hope that this conference will adopt the global work plan for education for sustainable development. Ladies and gentlemen, in the Sultanate of Oman, education is our top priority. It's been mainstreamed into all of our development policies. These policies have evolved over time, and as we've moved from one stage to the next, we have drawn inspiration from the needs that have arisen at each point in time, as we've tried to adapt to the changes of a global economy and global development. And at every step along the way, we've revised our policies and our goals in the field of education. And we've reached the conclusion that education is the main pillar upon which we can build sustainable societies, and that human beings are the ultimate objective of development. This has been stated in no uncertain terms by His Majesty the Sultan of Oman in speaking before the Parliament in 2013. On that occasion, he stressed the importance of education in every sector of society, in every area of policy making, in order to prepare society for the future. As part of this, we've adopted a series of development projects and programs, and we've taken on board an education philosophy and a national strategy for education up until 2040. In fact, these are the guiding principles enshrined in our policy documents to make sure that at every step along the way, our education programs are in sync with our overriding development goals. The Minister of Education has made sure that the values of local and global citizenship are enshrined in our educational programs. We believe that it is essential to be proud and aware of the history and heritage of our country in order to be better prepared for the future and to make it possible for all learners to acquire the skills they need for entrepreneurship and innovation. Ladies and gentlemen, mainstreaming ESD in every level of education, starting with early childhood education and primary education, is one of the things that has been made available for students to express themselves and to embrace the modern world. This, of course, cannot be accomplished without providing the necessary wherewithal to teachers themselves. Educators have to be given the skills they need in order to convey these ideas to learners so that ESD can become a reality in a variety of different education and training programs. This is why the Sultanate of Oman has trained a new generation of young teachers who will be agents for change. We will continue to be investing in their training in order to make sure that the environmental climate in our country is conducive to this. Ladies and gentlemen, the main concern of people around the world is youth. Young people are the most active and effective group for bringing about world peace. And this is why they must be directly involved in education for sustainable development so that we can tap into the energy that they have. The Sultanate of Oman warmly welcomes the work that UNESCO has been doing to reach out to young people, and in particular working with UNEP. We also welcome UNESCO support for the initiative of the dialogue between cultures sponsored by the Sultanate of Oman as a means of fostering dialogue and mutual understanding between cultures. The Alliance of Civilizations of the United Nations has recognized this program as one of the most important initiatives in civil society worldwide. The Sultanate of Oman has also given its support to youth initiatives and has made it possible for young people to acquire the skills they need. We've done this through organizing annual events every October focusing on young people. And we've tried to make it possible for them to have access to a wide range of different training programs to further enhance their skills. UNESCO's Associated Schools program plays a critical role in helping us all to achieve the objectives of the program for ESD. As such, we would like to pay tribute in particular to the government of Japan because it has worked closely with UNESCO in organizing the meeting of this network in 2014 so that we can take on board the recommendations of teachers and learners and prepare for the future. We would invite UNESCO to continue to lend its support to this network by establishing programs and activities that will make it possible for these schools to live up to their remit. Ladies and gentlemen, to guarantee the success of our ESD goals, member states have to work in partnership with civil society in order to come up with a shared vision and a common set of principles for this, and also to pool their efforts in order to bring all of these ideals into and make them realities. Now, we are still facing considerable challenges, natural disasters, climate change, armed conflict, the spread of epidemics. Because of this, my government has adopted policies in order to enhance its efforts to use its natural resources in the best possible way, i.e. the most sustainable way. Ladies and gentlemen, the step ahead requires of all of us that we pool our efforts, redouble our efforts in order to meet our ESD goals. In particular, through the main lines, the 5 main lines of action of the global work plan. I certainly wish this conference every success as we strive for our goals. Arigatou gozaimasu.
ありがとうございました。大臣、そして
That's 7 minutes or so that we asked you to all stay with, so I'm most grateful. Next to speak is Mr. Jacob Kamenye, who's a Cabinet Secretary of the Ministry of Education, Science and Technology in Kenya. The lectern is yours.
UNESCO Director General, fellow ministers, honored guests, ladies and gentlemen, I sincerely thank the government of Japan and its people for hosting and organizing this conference in collaboration with UNESCO. The world is looking back at its engagements made 15 years back and looking forward for new activities and new pathways for a more sustainable future. Ladies and gentlemen, Kenya is encouraged by the new thrust in support of ESD. The UN Conference on Sustainable Development called on member states, and I quote, to promote education for sustainable development and to integrate sustainable development more actively into education beyond the decade of education for sustainable development. We wholly support the final proposal for the Open Working Group for Sustainable Development Goals, that perfect formula sorry about that, which seeks by 2030 to ensure that all learners acquire knowledge and skills needed to promote sustainable development. And when we talk about all learners, we are talking about the poor, the rich of the earth, those of us who are in formal settlements, those of us who are arid and semi-arid areas, the nomads and the pastoralists. Madam Director General, the UN decade on ESD has been successful on raising awareness of the importance of changing our mindsets, as you rightly put it, making sure that our education systems are relevant to our local development, and I congratulate you on UNESCO's leadership in this area. Over and above the raised awareness, ladies and gentlemen, there's need to closely focus on what has been implemented around the world. I will now focus on my nation, Kenya. My country has not been left behind in this ESD movement. Kenya's development blueprint, which is aimed at making Kenya a globally competitive and prosperous nation, is a key goal of ensuring, and I quote, a nation living in clean, secure, and sustainable environment by the year 2030. Important sectors that contribute the biggest percentage to Kenya's GDP, namely agriculture and tourism, are directly linked to Kenya's effort to safeguard its environment. Our government is implementing the objectives of the United Nations Decade for Education for Sustainable Development through the National ESD Implementation Strategy, which is spearheaded by National Environmental Management Authority in cooperation with the Ministry of Education. The main objective of this strategy, ladies and gentlemen, is to guide all ESD interventions and provide an enabling environment and capacity for all sectors and stakeholders to effectively contribute towards the achievement of sustainable development. 9 regional centers of expertise in ESD have been established to increase awareness of ESD at local levels. To spearhead ESD initiatives in my country, a national steering committee drawn from the government, civil society, the private sector has been constituted. The close working relationship between the 3 entities is a perfect formula for creating public awareness on the importance of ESD. A key achievement of this multi-sector approach in Kenya is the Green Schools Initiative Program, a partnership initiative between the Ministry of Education, the Ministry of Environment, Water and Natural Resources. This initiative, ladies and gentlemen, recognizes schools as agents of change and focal points to communities from where the latter could buy seedlings so as to increase the forest cover, which in my country stands at 3%. Another key achievement is the ESD model schools in cooperation with Israel's Agency for International Development Cooperation, currently focusing on 2 model schools. In addition, my ministry, in collaboration with other key institutions, has established 2 ESD demonstration centers aimed at spearheading reorientation of school operations and infrastructure developments to address ESD concerns. Through this initiative, teachers are also benefiting through peer training. We have also included life skills education, peace education, guidance and counseling, and education for sustainable development programs in our 5-year education strategy, which spans between 2013 and 2018. This aims, ladies and gentlemen, at developing students who can make informed decisions and contribute to a local socio-economic development. A number of challenges obviously exist in the implementation of ESD, and among them is the national coordination of different ESD actors and initiatives and their contribution to the national strategy. Secondly, lack of capacity in the area of ESD, both technical and financial. ESD, as you have heard, is still a relatively new area in education, and many questions, of course, continue to be asked. Therefore, this calls for research on ESD, as has been mentioned, particularly from African universities, focusing on Africa's unique contexts. cooperation with institutions with a technical backup, such as UNESCO and other member states with more experiences, is important. In spite of these challenges, ladies and gentlemen, our government is careful not to lose the momentum which we have built during the last decade. I believe the challenges experienced by my country are similar to all other countries, as we have heard a few minutes ago. But I need to emphasize that we need to work together and develop strategies to overcome emerging challenges as comrades in one ship. Because if this one ship sinks, all of us sink. We shall have nowhere to go. My ministry, in collaboration with UNESCO and in line with the Global Action Program on ESD, so as to develop a national education strategy, we will do that, as well as guidelines for this strategy in the next 2 years. Through this policy, my country will concretely integrate ESD into the entire education system. Ladies and gentlemen, sometimes back in 2006, the African Ministers of Education made a commitment to implement the Decade of Education for Sustainable Development through a drafted strategy for ESD. It is one thing to make a commitment, and indeed another to make sure that this happens. So for us to be able to succeed, we require political goodwill, which indeed has been witnessed through the endorsement of the strategy that I've mentioned. The achievements throughout the continent, however, have been uneven. An environmental education and training action plan for Africa has been developed, which seeks to directly build capacity for responding to environmental issues, risks, and associated sustainable development challenges in the entire continent. I am glad to note that the Worldwide Fund is currently supporting the East African community to develop a regional ESD policy and to mainstream ESD in the curriculum harmonization structures and frameworks. To leverage on the current efforts, more attention should be given to African youth, thus increasing their interest in ESD. I wish to thank UNESCO and indeed the government of Japan for having organized a youth World Congress on ESD, as you have heard, preceding this particular conference. And that particular youth congress sought by 2030 to ensure that, that everybody's really is involved in this matter. As I conclude, ladies and gentlemen, let me reiterate my country's support for UNESCO's Global Action Plan as a follow-up to DSD. We particularly welcome the 5 areas of focus, namely policy support, institutional support, educators, youth, and local communities. Finally, I would like to thank the Japanese government for the approval of the 195th UNESCO Board for the establishment of UNESCO Japan Prize for Education for Sustainable Development. Undoubtedly, this prize will go a long way in promoting and supporting ESD globally. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you, Cabinet Secretary. Next to speak is Mr. Nurul Islam Nahid. He is Minister of Education for Bangladesh. Thank you, Minister. All the ministerial speeches will be about 7 minutes.
Her Royal Highness, the Princess of Morocco, Lala Hassana, Honorable Director General of UNESCO, Madam Irina Bokova, Honorable Ministers, distinguished representatives and delegates, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, a very good day to you all. It is indeed a great pleasure and honor for me to to attend the UNESCO World Conference on Education for Sustainable Development, Learning Today for a Sustainable Future, in this beautiful city of Nagoya. Bangladesh, being one of the proud members of Girls Education First Initiative Championship countries, I am very happy to share some of our thoughts and achievements in ESD with this distinguished audience. I would like to take this opportunity to convey my sincere thanks and deep appreciation to Madam Irina Bokova, Director General of UNESCO, and the Government of Japan for excellent arrangements made for the conference and the warm hospitality extended to me and my delegation. I am confident that the conference will achieve its goal under the able and dynamic leadership of UNESCO, its Director General, and the leaders struggling world over. Education for sustainable development is of critical importance for the world community, particularly for the developing countries and LDCs. ESD is the use of education as a tool to achieve sustainability. It allows every human being to acquire the knowledge, skills, attitudes, and values necessary to shape a sustainable future. It also enables students to relate what they learn in the classroom to their real-life actions, and thus contributes to changing their behavior and lifestyle towards a better future. ESD is also empowering people to take actions that contribute towards sustainable outcomes. It encourages people to work towards a better future. As per the policy briefing of Network Education Policy Centers, we need to incorporate some vital elements in the curriculum in order to realize sustainable education. A few of these are: ESD should become one of the fundamental principles of curriculum. The ESD relevant themes missing in the curriculum should be introduced in the knowledge content of the compulsory education in both framework curriculum and subject curriculum. And teachers' training for ESD competencies should be introduced at in-service and pre-service level. Ladies and gentlemen, the government Bangladesh, led by the Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina, upon assuming its office in 2009, adopted Vision 2021 to turn Bangladesh into a middle-income country, technology-based and poverty-free country by 2021. The education sector has been given utmost priority. In line with the vision of the government, we formulated a national education policy in 2010, which was lauded by people from all strata of the country. The education policy at present provides for free and compulsory education for all up to class 5, and we have plans to increase it up to class 8. The government provides stipends to 40% students at primary and secondary level. We also started giving stipend to 133,000 girls from last year at higher secondary and tertiary level. We have achieved a number of MDGs in education well ahead of time. Our target is to bring every child to school. We achieved almost 99% enrollment in primary school. It is indeed a great pleasure that we already achieved gender parity at primary and secondary level by the end of 2012, 3 years ahead of stipulated time. However, our challenge still remains the dropouts. Ladies and gentlemen, in our primary education sector, we have reserved 60% quota for female teachers, and we have almost achieved it. we have taken some very innovative and inclusive programs in primary and secondary levels to reduce dropouts and increase the quality of education. One such unique program is the free distribution of textbooks to students from class 1 to class 10. We started this journey in 2010 by distributing 191 million textbooks among 17.6 million students, including pre-primary. The number of students every year increasing and dropout decreasing. We will be distributing 326 million textbooks among 44.3 million students on the first day of January 2015. We are creating research opportunities for improving the quality of higher education. We are also investing on technical and vocational education for promoting skill development, and we are getting results. The government of Bangladesh has also taken a number of initiatives to implement ESD in the country. I would like to share some of the best practices that have been set nationally to ensure ESD in Bangladesh. Various social, economic, and environmental issues like climate change, cultural diversity, tolerance, etc. have been incorporated in the curriculum of primary and secondary education. Besides, some of public and private universities have separate departments for sustainable development, peace and human rights. As for sustainable development, we have devised a national sustainable development strategy, including identification of priority areas for sustainable development. These priority areas include intra-alia, disaster risk reduction, climate change, good governance, and gender issues. The government has also enacted a national ICT policy in 2009 with the aim and objective of building a knowledge-based society. Ladies and gentlemen, the government has initiatives to upgrade and modernize the national curriculum for the purpose of education for sustainable development under the supervision of National Curriculum and Textbook Board to meet the requirements of ESD. Ladies and gentlemen, learning of ESD goes beyond the classroom. The students learn from their families, peers, workplaces, the media, social forums, and networks, and the environment. There are many other influences in the society that also help to shape the ways we think, feel, and act. In ESD, it is essential to learn informally other than learning in a formal institutions. We are facing huge challenges in implementing ESD. The challenges are of a diverse nature that include awareness problem to resources constraint to technical and financial support. We need great efforts from all the stakeholders, including national, regional, and international stakeholders for the success of our efforts in ESD. Let us build a better future together for our next generation. Thank you all for your patient hearing. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Minister. Thank you very much, Minister Nurul Islam Nahid. Some very positive messages, I think you'll agree, coming from Bangladesh. Next at the lectern is Mr. Mageli, and he is Minister of Education, Sports and Culture in Samoa.
Your Royal Highness, UNESCO Director General, Ministers, Ambassadors, Excellencies, Delegates, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for the opportunity to address this prestigious conference of distinguished delegations from around the world. This conference is of great importance to small island developing states like Samoa, where global efforts are embraced to address numerous challenges of our time that poses threat to the survival and viability of small island nations. In a recent international conference of small island developing states that was held in our country, Samoa, last September, the heads of states and governments and high-level representatives with the full participation of civil society and the private sector recalls and reaffirms the commitment made at previous United Nations conferences and summits on sustainable development for SIDS. It reaffirms that this commitment can only be achieved with a broad alliance of people, governments, civil society, and the private sector, all working together to achieve the future we want for present and future generations of SIDS. The Samoa Pathway Outcome Statement of the Third International Conference SIDS 2014 covers an enormous scope of challenges for sustainable development of SIDS. This is in view of the unique and particular vulnerability that SIDS remain constrained in meeting their goals in all three dimensions of sustainable development: economic, social, and environmental. As Minister for Education, Sports and Culture from Samoa, I wish to draw your particular attention to the outcome of the Third International Conference on SIDS-related education for sustainable development. One, reaffirm that full and equal access to quality education at all levels is an essential condition for achieving sustainable development, and the importance of local, national, regional, and international efforts in this regard. Two, we, the participants of the SIDS conference, are committed in regard to the strong support and effort of small island state developing states to provide quality education and training for youths and girls with a focus on the most vulnerable, in particular persons with disabilities, including in creative, cultural, and environmental related fields, so that all people have the necessary skills and can take advantage of employment and opportunities to lead productive lives. To ensure that education contributes to further building peace and promoting social inclusion, and to increase their investment in education, training, and skills development for all, including vocational training, and to improve their access to formal and non-formal education, including to gain entrepreneurial skills through both formal and non-formal means, such as the use of distance teaching and the development of training approaches appropriate for small island developing states. For Samoa's education for sustainable development, the critical challenges that we currently face, which needs to be addressed towards 2030, include but are not limited to quality of education, quality of teachers, including TVET teachers and trainers, enhanced relevance of education and training at all levels, and increased investment in education. Our government has identified education as a key priority in addressing issues and challenges in sustainable development, such as poverty reduction, climate change, disaster risk reduction, biodiversity, and sustainable consumption and production, to name a few. We believe as a nation that the goals in all three dimensions of sustainable development, economic, social, and environmental, can only be met with the provision of quality education for our people. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for the opportunity to report on the outcomes of the Third International Conference of SIDS and Samoa's challenges and efforts in addressing challenges pertaining to ESD. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Minister. Thank you very much, Mr. Migeli. Please now welcome Cornelia Kwennet-Thielen, Germany's Vice Minister, who replaces Joanna Wanka, who was very committed to come to the conference, but at the last minute has sent her deputy. So thanks to you, Vice Minister, for stepping in.
Your Royal Highness, Honorable Director General, Ministers, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. Sustainable development is development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. This is the famous definition of sustainability as stated in the 1987 Brundtland Report. Since then, sustainability has rested on 3 pillars, and so does the German National Strategy for Sustainable Development. We are combining efforts to protect the environment with efforts to promote social inclusion and economic development. Sustainability for us implies a holistic understanding of humankind, the environment, and its needs. It was at the Rio Earth Summit in 1992 that sustainability became the normative guiding principle of the international community of states and the cornerstone of a new global partnership. The decade of education for sustainability was proclaimed 10 years later at the World Summit in Johannesburg in 2002. And Germany was very honored to host the midterm conference of the decade 5 years ago in Bonn. I think a lot of you attended that conference. We are firmly convinced that there cannot be a good future without sustainability. And if we are all convinced of this, the decisive question is, how can we firmly anchor this principle in our everyday life? I think the answer clearly is through education. This year's Nobel Peace Prize winner was awarded, this year's Nobel Peace Prize was awarded to Malala Yousafzai, aged 17, for her fight for the right to education. Her commitment nearly cost her her life. When she addressed the Youth Assembly last year, she said, I quote, "One child, one teacher, one book and one pen can change the world. Education is the only solution." Our task, ladies and gentlemen, is to enable good education worldwide in order to change our world. We are convinced good education forms the basis for participation. It forms the basis for a self-determined life and the basis for assuming responsibility. This is precisely what sustainability is about responsibility for ourselves, for our fellow human beings, and for future generations. We cannot fully know what next generations may need and what they will invent, but it is our duty to give them a livable earth, a world full of opportunities, and a world that has learned to work together across all borders and despite all differences. The current year has demonstrated in a very disturbing way just how difficult this can be. But this should not knock us off course. On the contrary, we must jointly stand up for respect for human beings and nature, and we must do so with full conviction. Think globally, act locally. These are the 2 aspects also of education for sustainable development. One involves a basic understanding of the global challenges that are affecting all of us: climate change, economic globalization, the fight against disease and poverty, risks to democracy and justice. The other involves knowledge and consideration of what each and every one of us can do locally, in our families, our village, our town or region. Change begins in the mind. It begins with the ability to think both critically and self-critically. That is what we have conveyed in educating our youth. And encouraging such change cannot be a task for governments and states alone. Society, politics, science, private sector, and culture all must make their own specific contributions. In Germany, we have seen that transformation to sustainability requires the genuine and lasting involvement of all stakeholders, of the whole of civil society. I'm proud of what we have achieved in Germany under the umbrella of the UN Decade of Education for Sustainable Development. In 10 years, we have established an entire new field of education policies based on a national plan of action and a strong national implementation structure. We are resolutely tackling ecological, economic, and social challenges. Let me mention as one example Germany's Energiewende, the energy turnaround, which we introduced following the Fukushima disasters. Research and practice are working hand in hand in Germany to ensure more sustainability. The global success of German environmental technologies, for example, is based on the ideas of our researchers. As a country of successful suppliers of environmental technologies, these account for 15% of the world markets, and they secure around 2 million jobs in a greening economy, contributing to a greening society. Education for Sustainable Development also thrives on this cooperation between educators and researchers. Together, they have developed learning and teaching materials and general frameworks for education for sustainable development in our schools. They have also developed models for integrating sustainability in vocational education and training. But above all, education for sustainable development in Germany thrives on the commitment of civil society, of dedicated volunteers, and of non-governmental organizations. Their many activities are the basis for ESD success in Germany, and many of them were awarded German projects of the UN Decade. This gave broad public visibility to good practice. Therefore, the Decade flag awarded by our National Commission is flying over more than 2,000 schools, companies, people homes, museums, or town halls in our country. Students, teachers, artists, people from companies and public administration, as well as NGOs, they all see themselves as ambassadors for ESD. Sustainability has become a guiding principle in the policies of many places, whether it is big cities or small rural communities. Germany today is committed to sustainability. We therefore warmly welcome UNESCO's Global Action Programme and will support it wholeheartedly. 2 months ago, at our national conference to mark the end of the UN Decade, we saw strong support for all 5 priority areas, with a special focus for our country on empowering young people, on supporting local communities, and on training our educators even better for ESD. A Japanese proverb says, "A seed that is not sown will not grow." The seed of the UN Decade for ESD is growing. Now it is up to all of us to water and nurture it so that we can reap the harvest every year. Thank you so much.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Vice Minister. And an excellent description or definition of sustainability. Indeed, thanks to all the ministers and secretaries for speaking so well. and also for largely staying within their 7 minutes, give or take a minute or two, but thanks for doing that. Just a reminder that more ministers will have a chance to speak this afternoon, not quite for as long, during the high-level round table. Now it's time to hear from Ms. Sue Choi. Please stay on the stage if you like, who is Director of the Division for Teaching, Learning and Content. Sue Choi will be giving an overview of the conference, and that means putting everything we've been talking about and will talk about into perspective, with a reminder this is all, a technical discussion. Sue Choi, please, a warm welcome to you, and take your place at the lectern.
Her Royal Highness, Honorable Ministers, Vice Ministers, distinguished guests, participants, ladies and gentlemen. In this presentation, we'd like to share with you a few technical aspects of the conference to facilitate your understanding of and participation in it. Now, about how we come to organize this conference as we do now. In 2009, Japan expressed an interest in hosting a conference to mark the end of the decade. The UNESCO General Conference organized in the same year welcomed this offer from Japan. In 2011, the member states requested UNESCO to develop follow-up options for the decade. In 2013, the Global Action Program was endorsed by the 37th UNESCO General Conference as follow-up to the decade. The same session requested UNESCO Director General to bring GAP to attention of the UN General Assembly in New York. As requested, GAP was sent to New York this year. Now, how is this being followed up by the member states in New York? Lately, a draft resolution on GAP has been introduced by the Group 77 and China to the Second Committee of the 69th UN General Assembly. The resolution notes the organization of this conference that we all are attending at this very moment. It also takes note of UNESCO decision on GAP as follow-up to the decade, inviting governments to implement it and UNESCO to coordinate its implementation. It also requests the UN Secretary General to include this conference in the review report of the decade that will be submitted to the 70th session of the UN General Assembly in 2015. Now, the second committee is expected to convene this week, in fact, to adopt a resolution. Once adopted, this resolution will be submitted formally to the plenary of the General Assembly before the end of this year. By UNESCO terminology, this conference is a Category 4 conference, which means it is a conference convened by the UNESCO Director General for technical discussion, not statutory decisions. A Category 4 conference does not require a formal chairing system. However, for the high-level roundtable and the closing, which requires some degree of record formality, we have arranged a co-chairing system involving Japan and UNESCO Secretariat. This conference is organized jointly with the government of Japan, which has provided generously, efficiently, and effectively the financial, organization, and technical supports for the conference, for which we are very grateful. The objective of the conference is twofold: to mark the end of the decade and to launch GAP as its follow-up. The key outputs include the launching of the final decade report and the Global Action Program, and the adoption of the Aichi-Nagoya Declaration. Program. The conference contains 4 plenaries, 34 workshops, 44 exhibitions, and 25 side events. There are also a few receptions, cultural performances, and press conference sessions organized throughout the conference. Now, Aichi-Nagoya Declaration. The first draft has been prepared through pre-conference consultation processes. The results of the stakeholders meeting held in Okayama have also been reflected in this first draft, which you all have received this morning. In the next 2 days, a drafting group will finalize the declaration in view of the comments received from you and also of the results produced by the conference. The finalized text, which will be very short and succinct, will be submitted to the closing plenary for adoption. The drafting group for the declaration consists of 6 government officials representing and recommended by the 6 UNESCO regional electoral groups, and also 6 individuals representing the parties listed on the screen, and 1 general rapporteur. As for your comments on the draft that are being solicited, please do send them electronically to this email address shown on screen, or bring them to the information and secretariat desk in the main lobby, to which you may also like to direct your other inquiries and questions you may have about the conference. Importantly, your comments on the draft have to reach us no later than 7 o'clock this evening. Last but not least, we are taking a few measures to green the conference as described here. We will appreciate your support and cooperation. If there is room for improvement, please do let us know. Thank you.
Thank you, Sue Choi, for that stop check that I promised you, except she did it far better than I could have done. After all, sustainable development is hard to define, although we heard some excellent definitions from the ministers earlier. It's also continually evolving, which therefore makes it doubly difficult to define, and that completes pretty much our plenary for this morning. And now it's time for the pictures. So that means we're going to have a family photo session. And this is how it's going to work. So I think we've got a slide that I sort of drew up earlier. There you are. The 2-step solution, I call it. Now, first, we're going to have all the speakers of the opening plenary. So all the speakers of the opening plenary should come on stage. The second one, with all the ministers and vice ministers joining in. So ministers and vice ministers out there, please follow the volunteers who will come and guide you to your designated place. The photo session will start very soon, so I know you want to get to lunch, but we need to record you for posterity, if for no other reason. When it says please look up, obviously that means the photographer's up there somewhere.